Hello, everyone. This is Candice Dickens, and I have such an amazing guest, my friend Denise Williams. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited. I'm so excited to be here and learn more about polyvagal from you, the expert, and ask the questions that my clients need to hear and I need to hear and all that amazing stuff. So I'm super excited.
Oh, awesome, awesome. For those of you who don't know, polyvagal is my thing. I love everything polyvagal, and we're actually doing a training, right, on February the 9th.
Ninth
And
and 10th.
9th
Uh-huh.
and 10th, 2-day training,
Yes.
14
Uh-huh.
CEUs. Make sure that you
Uh-huh.
get there. Registration is open today. Where can
Yes.
people register at? So if they want to attend the training, we'll
So
announce it
if
at the end.
you, yeah, so if you want to register, you can go to wellplay.com. So that's WELL hyphen play.com. And then go to WellPlay University on the site, and you can click and register if you are a student, if you're a therapist, if you're just learning. It's going to be awesome. Um, I literally went looking for you, Candice. I was on the hunt for you. I was like, I have got to find a clinician of color who can help us understand how to calm these nervous systems,
Yes.
right? I started sitting with clients full time in 2019, and real fast, I was like, this talking is not working. These people are rocking and shaking and tapping. And I was just like, ooh, I gotta find something to help.
Yeah. It's funny, like you, I started noticing that my clients, especially when the racial upheaval, here we had I'm in Maryland. And I
Mhm.
noticed that even though the riots were over, people stayed activated. And no matter how much I would talk with them, right, they would stay activated. But even before that, if I have clients who have like generational trauma, something happened to daddy, something happened to grandpa, something happened to siblings, that even
Mhm.
though they knew that they were safe, they were still guarded. They couldn't let down
Yeah.
their guard. They couldn't be intimate. They had difficulty
Yes.
with just being with sharing and
Yeah.
being present. So they were always 4 steps ahead,
Yes.
right? They would say, I got to stay ready in order so I won't have to get ready. So they were
Right.
always
Yes.
guarded, right? Or they were shut
Yes.
down. You just couldn't move them.
Yes.
You would ask how
Yeah.
you're doing, right? Just shut
Mhm.
down
Mhm.
and just
Mhm.
dead from the neck down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
that led me to learn all these different type of modalities. And we've talked about about brain spotting and EMDR
Mhm.
and internal family systems and somatic
Yeah.
experiencing and DBT. And what I realized is that the goal really is to getting people to a place of safety,
Yes.
right? And even though there are different ways of getting there, it's like traveling. You can get there by plane, bus, car, walking. Walking will get you there, but it's slower if you're walking 30 miles. I can get there
Mhm.
faster by plane. However, we're all
Mhm.
getting to the same destination. But the goal is
Right.
to get
Right.
there. And that's the beautiful thing
Yes.
about the polyvagal theory. It really
Mhm.
talks about that third level, that third connection, which people don't really talk about, which is that level of social connection. We know
Mhm.
about that fight flight. Even, pre kindergartners know about fight flight. When you get upset, you run. You know,
Right. Right.
when that
Or you
happens, you
fight.
hide. Right, right. So you
Yes.
freeze, right? But then there's this
Right.
other thing that happens, right, which is social connection. And for a lot of people, they don't realize that polyvagal nerve is the longest nerve. We call it the wandering nerve because it goes throughout the body. And this is the nerve
Okay.
that tells you whether or not there is danger or your safety. And for people who
Mhm.
have historical generational trauma, people who look
Mhm.
like you and I, people of color,
Mhm.
people who know
Mhm.
oppression or discrimination, people of certain
Mhm.
genders, people of certain
Mhm.
sexualities, who know
Yes.
what it's like to be othered and to be
Mhm.
violated, that their
Mhm.
brain will say, wow, no situation is safe. And the polyvagal nerve will say, wow, even though it looks safe and everyone's at this barbecue, everyone's at this picnic having a great time, it's not safe for you. And we will stay at a place of activation,
Mhm.
right? Because we call it the
Yes.
neuroceptive mismatch. We can't
Right.
figure out when it's safe and not safe because his,
So So does that also apply? So that's from a trauma lens, right? Like I feel like I'm not safe. But what about people just and the truth is most of the time there's some trauma there, but right
yeah,
now people they'll say like, oh, I got social anxiety, right? And that they're going and they don't feel safe in a room. So is this helpful for that as well?
Oh, it is because what it does, like when you think about when people have social anxiety, there's fear of vulnerability, fear of death, fear of harm, right? And there's this thing about being socially connected to people. Something about that is dangerous, or something
Mm-hmm.
about that is terrifying. And usually there's a history, or they've seen thing, or they witnessed it. Because you can have anxiety not based on what happened to you, but what you've seen or what you thought
Mm-hmm.
of. So when people
Right.
have anxiety, sometimes it's not what they've seen, it's what their mind creates, right?
Gotcha.
And what the mind
Gotcha.
believes, because
Gotcha.
there's a fine line between reality and fantasy. So for a lot of us, even when we
Gotcha.
dream, and years later, it was like, I'm not sure if that was a dream or that was real, right? Or
Yeah.
we wake up and our heart's beating fast because the body doesn't know that you've been dreaming. It thinks a bear was really
Right.
chasing you and you
Right.
flew off a
Gotcha.
cliff.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
the way the mind works is that when people have social anxiety, it's the thought of, and the prefrontal lobe is a part of your brain that
Mm,
thinks about what you're thinking. But sometimes that
mm,
part thinks about things that are not quite here. And it doesn't
gotcha.
realize that things you're thinking about are not happening, but you
So it
believe it.
doesn't really differentiate.
No, it
It
doesn't.
just takes what it's thinking. So
Right.
I could also see if you have really bad depression and you're struggling and you got to go and you don't feel good and you're feeling safe and vulnerable and are
Mhm.
people watching me and I don't know if I should be here because those thoughts are all kind of creating this fear. The brain doesn't distinguish.
It
Again,
doesn't.
you're
It doesn't.
activated.
It doesn't.
Okay.
And it's almost like I
Okay.
saw this movie called Megan this weekend. And
Uh-huh.
my brain, and I'm like this, and there's a 5-year-old beside me, like, oh, and I'm like, come on. My brain doesn't care that a 5-year-old child next to me is not scared. My brain seeing someone being harmed, and it doesn't realize, doesn't register for that minute that I paid $8 to see this movie, and there's an actress, and there's all these things being manipulated. It doesn't know that whatever I think, my brain thinks it's
Gotcha.
real, and I'm
Okay.
activating, which is why people will cry at movies. People will cry
Gotcha.
when they hear something
Yeah.
or a
Yeah.
song. It triggers something, right? And
Right.
that's what the
Right.
polyvagal experience is so important, because the polyvagal is the part of the brain that sends the message throughout the body about safety and connection. And it always
Okay.
asks, is it safe to be present and is it safe to be connected? And what you think
Mm,
impacts what the body feels. So there's this
gotcha.
mismatch sometimes, right? Sometimes what you think and what you feel are matched, and sometimes it's not. So when people have
Mm,
social anxiety, what they feel is terror, even during safe places. Like Aretha Franklin had a fear of traveling by plane, so she
mhm,
would take she certain places she couldn't go. She would get on a bus or a boat,
mhm,
but she wouldn't. So even though that there are lots of people who survived traveling by plane, her
right,
anxiety says, her phobia says, if I do
right,
that, I'm going to die. And not because
right,
she knew anyone who died, but when the mind thinks it, it gets stuck on that thought, and whatever
right,
you think, you manifest,
right,
right? You
right.
react
And
to that.
that's why what's the modality that teach you like seek safety where you go places and they tell you like identify how you can get out and how you can exit and recognize those things because the brain just doesn't get it. The brain's like this just not it just feels like it's not safe. So if I'm understanding you, the polyvagal, this nerve, this what we're going to learn or come to understand is how to use that to help you.
Yeah, to create regulation, because the
Okay.
polyvagal travels from the cranium all the way down to the face, down to the brainstem, and it has a direct link from the brain to the gut, which is why we'll say, well, you're having gut issues, you're having brain
Yes,
issues.
yes, yes,
What are
yes.
you
Right.
thinking? What's happening? What have you
Gotcha.
experienced? That's
Right.
traveling right down. So people say, I can't
Uh,
breathe. It's like, no, because of the fact that that polyvagal has stimulated your endocrine system, and now you're having anxiety. It's causing you to have a rush of adrenaline, and your heart is
uh,
beating fast. Your lungs
gotcha.
are constricted. So what we'll see
Gotcha.
with people is,
Oh,
if you can connect to that polyvagal through exercises and techniques, then what you can do is create a sense of calmness. So the person can sit with their anxious with, and this is
okay.
not meditation, but it's getting the person to a place of being in a rhythm,
Hmm.
and really connecting to that nerve. So there's space for their anxiety, but there's also space for their curiosity. And there's also space for the connection. So we'll say to people, you're not
Gotcha.
feeling safe, but is there something you feel safe to in this world? What does it mean? I know in this moment you're not feeling safe, but is there someone in the world who you feel
Hmm.
safe with? My mother. So I want you to connect to her, imagine her,
Hmm.
connect to her.
Uh,
I see her. Or can you connect to a time you
because you
did?
can bring that into your
You
body.
can bring that into your body. You can bring it into the body. You can hold on to that. Or I can't think of anything. Well, can you feel your feet on the ground? What? Yeah, feel your feet on the ground. And just notice that it's like to feel grounded and
Mhm.
allow that feeling to travel into the body. Because if I go
Mhm.
from body up, right,
Mhm.
then the nerve, the
Mhm.
body says, whoa, something's happening. Brain, pay attention. Maybe since the body's relaxing, maybe the brain
Gotcha.
can say, I'm okay, right?
So when you've had, so as a therapist who's had clients who've had anxiety for many years, and so they always feel like they're on 10, right? Even
Yeah.
though in their mind they're trying to create this place, their body is still dysregulated, right?
Hmm.
Um, and that's
And
what
then their
I
relationships get dysregulated. So if your
mhm.
body's dysregulated, then your relationships are dysregulated and they're up and down like
Mm,
this. And they're
gotcha.
easily wounded, easily broken, right?
Gotcha. Okay. So you got to calm that.
Yeah, you have to learn how to calm that, and you have to learn how to be in tune when you're in that up spike, and be curious about what is that up spike is, what's connected to that, and really be like using a
Mhm.
little bit of somatic experiencing and being able to sit with that like a pendulum when it goes up. Sit with that for a second, and giving yourself an opportunity to come down. Difference between someone asks a question: Can you speak the difference between meditation and
Mhm.
calming? When I'm meditating, I'm taking the breath in, I'm making space. But when I'm doing polyvagal exercises, what I'm doing is I'm doing a grounding experience with an awareness that there's danger here, or there's fear here, or there's a trauma here. And I'm connecting with it. I'm not pushing it away, right? Meditating, I'm not pulling it out. I'm sitting with it. And I'm giving my body permission to regulate the nervous system. So instead of doing that activation, that fight, that flight, right, or that fight, I'm noticing that impulse and I'm being curious with it. And I'm allowing
Mhm.
my brain to lean in and be curious about that while noticing where the other parts of my body are at. My butt is sitting in the chair. My feet are on the floor. My mouth is now open. So I'm really connecting to all parts of me where meditation sometimes takes me someplace else. Like when I do meditations, I'm taking me someplace else. I'm taking me to Jamaica. I might be taking me just to my breath. When we do polyvagal exercises, I'm not taking you anywhere. I'm connecting with everything. Because when
In your body, right?
Right. Because when we
Right.
flight, we're disconnecting. So if this is the thing I'm
Right.
afraid of, if I'm fighting it, I'm not trying to connect with it. I'm trying to hit it. I'm trying to hurt it. But when we're doing polyvagal experiences, we're trying to do the connection, which is why when we talked before, we talked
Right.
about the importance of, oh, you're welcome, Annie. When we talked about the importance of tone, right? Because the
Right.
nerve is like an electrical circuit and it vibrates at different tones. So different
Mhm.
frequencies are calming for the system. So when you hear people say, oh, put in certain music, bilateral music, because the nerves play to a different
Mhm.
tone. And some tones are
Gotcha.
very calming, and
And
some tones are
sometimes,
agitating and aggravating because
yeah,
it's all
yeah,
through the nervous system. So that
yeah.
really is a difference between that and meditation.
And I just wanted to bring up, right? So when you sit with a client and their body is dysregulated and you're trying to get them to breathe or you're trying to get them to meditate, they can't. They can't because their nervous system is sounds like it's off,
Yeah,
right? Or it's active, not off, it's activated. And so when it's activated, they really can't calm. So
yeah,
you almost need this if you're working with patients who have
absolutely.
anxiety or traumatized. You actually have to work with this first before they can even begin to really experience a meditative experience.
Oh, absolutely. So for a lot of clients, I'll say, you know what? Because people say, just breathe. And we'll say, wow, that's only part of it, right? Which is why we'll
Mm,
say, breathe, take a breath in, and then slowly exhale out. And oftentimes they'll say, now notice where your stomach's at. I'm really connecting you not just to the breath, but to the connect to the stomach. Because remember I said the polyvagal has nerves that travel throughout the brain, but there's when it goes from here to the stomach. And if I can get you just to breathe out and soften your stomach, it tells that nerve that's in the polyvagal system, turn off a little bit, soften up a little bit. Because
mm,
I want the lungs to relax, then I've got to
okay, yeah.
use the body to turn off the adrenaline system, right? Because it's
Okay.
the adrenaline and the oxytocin that keeps it in the system. But if I want your body to relax, I've got to turn off the adrenaline system, which means I've got to stop the body from being activated. I've got to turn off
Gotcha.
that autonomic fight response, right? So
Gotcha. Yeah.
whenever clients come in, it's not just getting them to breathe, which is why a lot of clinicians will say, oh, it's the breathing. The breath is important because breath is life, but it's also about that connection. Because if you think about how we're even conceived, right? It's the egg and the sperm.
Mhm.
And they
Mhm.
come when they come together for a connection, that's when the ovum is formed,
Mhm.
right? And when that ovum
Mhm.
divides, it's still dividing into itself, more connection. And
Mhm.
that embryo, that zygote, cannot live without being connected to the uterus. It's that
Mhm.
attachment. It's not viable until it attaches and burrows itself into the uterus, and then the umbilical cord, it's developed, and the baby grows, but it grows connected to the mother. So the whole
Mm-hmm.
system is about connection, which is what polyvagal theory is about. It's about that social connection, about what happens, especially in the different branches of the polyvagal system. What happens in that connection? So when babies are born, the first voice they look for is who? Who's the first
The
voice they look?
mother.
The
Yeah.
mother.
The voices that they've heard. Yeah. The mom.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
because they're looking for the connection. And I remember I had twins, so we would put on at night the heartbeat because the
Mm-hmm.
baby's living right under the heart. So it's soothing for them because they're looking for that connection. So when we're
Mm-hmm.
doing
What they know.
therapy,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. So as you're moving your head up and down, I'm moving my head because now we're in regulation.
Mm,
And
okay.
with regulation comes attachment, right?
Uh-huh.
And
Okay.
that's where the
Right.
healing is happening. So a lot of times in life, we become detached and we become
Mm-hmm.
more attached to things that keep us safe than attached to the
Mm-hmm.
ability that we are safe, that we can
Gotcha.
regulate, that even in, like I love what people say, even I'm in prison, I still have a sense of self. I still have a sense of agency. So even
Mm-hmm.
though you're in prison, you can't open the bars, you can't regulate when they wake you up. Mm-mm. But see, even though I'm in prison, there's still freedom within myself. I can still choose how activated I get, how
Yeah.
regulated, and I
Yeah.
can choose what thoughts come in and come out.
And so I love this idea of wherever you are, because we know as folks of color, we are often daily in places where we are being dysregulated. There's
Yeah,
microaggressions. We're sitting in a room, we're not sure it's safe. Sometimes we're the only body there. Um, Discussions come up, it doesn't feel comfortable. And so you're saying that if I can learn to connect with this nerve, that
yeah,
even in places where I don't feel the best, I can calm myself.
yeah. You can calm yourself and connect back to yourself, right? Because we only do disconnection when we don't feel safe. And then
Mhm.
unfortunately what happens, we stay disconnected in order to be safe. And
Yes,
then we
right,
have relationships and we're wondering why are those so disconnected? Because that's safety for you. That when you know
right,
how to pull away and not deal with things and you move things
right,
around, you I can't even say the word, you put in things in different compartments and
right.
we never get back to the self. So the self never grows. It just has
Mm,
survival mechanisms. Like if you do IFS, there are different parts, the protective parts. But the
right,
exile part, the part that got injured, never grows up. It stays
right.
sweet.
It stays hidden. So,
Right.
so for those that are watching who are not therapists, I think what I hear you saying is, just for the layperson, that when we are hurt or traumatized, no matter how old we are, we regress. And that part of us, if we don't know how to reconnect it, it retreats and it hides. And
Yes.
that is the painful part. And so often that's what we call the little girl inside or the little boy inside, who's fighting, who's creating the problems, who's wreaking havoc.
Yeah.
We don't absolutely know it that way, but we feel like something's not. Yes, absolutely, right? Your inner child
Yeah.
is acting out, and
That
they
wounded
never
child.
connect that wounded, yes, the
Right.
wounded inner child, right,
Right. It's
hasn't been
acting out.
reconnected. And so the goal here is to bring that back into the connection.
Absolutely. And part of doing the connection is making sure that all parts are connection because some people are thinkers and the way they do connection is they overthink and then they overworry. And they don't realize when they're doing overthinking,
Rumination,
overworrying,
worry.
overeating, everything to excess. And we'll say, wow, why are you
Mhm,
doing that? Look what you're doing to the body. You're holding it hostage,
mhm,
right? Or they're
mhm,
just doing things
mhm.
to feel. And they're like, I don't know what happened. I spent all my mortgage money. I got depressed because you were doing somatic things. You were eating, you were feeling, but you weren't thinking. You were disconnected. You didn't think about what it would do to you to be a diabetic to eat that whole cake. All you wanted to do was feel better. And the
Right.
part of your brain that does that high level thinking was offline. Because here's the
Right.
thing, if your prefrontal lobe is on and think what you're thinking, oftentimes the emotional part of your is quiet. You're like Dr.
So say
Spock.
that, give that to me
So
again. So the
if your
layperson, give
prefrontal
that to
lobe,
me again.
this is the part of your brain that thinks about what you're thinking, right? This is what you're thinking,
Uh-huh.
what you're thinking. So this is the prefrontal lobe. This is the cortex, right?
Okay.
The spongy part.
Okay.
This is the thing that says, "Wow, glasses." The this part says, "Oh, you use glasses to read."
Uh-huh.
Right? This can name it.
Uh-huh.
So when people have aphasia or they have dementia, they can go, I know what that's at. That's glasses. And the doctor will say, very good. Now, what do you do with it? And they're at a loss because a lot of the plaques are on the prefrontal lobe. Your
Mm,
personality is here. think problem solving is here, which is why we'll say you don't grow up until this part is finished. And the back of the brain is the emotional brain. It's where the amygdala is at, the flight center, right? The amygdala is the control of all the emotions. When
Mhm.
information comes in, people think it comes here first. No, it goes to the emotional part of the brain first. It's like a ball. You throw it, it goes to the back of the room, and it bounces forward. So you feel it, then you name it, and then you think about it. But what
And you
happens?
process it.
Right. But sometimes
And
when
so when in trauma, what's happening is it's hitting the back of the brain and it's going
back,
no further
right.
because now you're in fight or flight and
There
the
you
old
go.
brain
And your
clicks in,
emotions are in.
stop.
And
Right.
right next to that is the hippocampus. Like think about a hippo. Hippo never forgets. Your memories are here. And your
Uh,
hippo never forgets. What it will say, what do you know about this? What do you remember about this feeling?
right.
Oh,
Run. It
it's
was
fun,
scary. It would hurt
right?
me.
And
Right.
it
Get out
goes,
of the way.
yep,
It's not going to be good for me.
there you
So it's
go.
never even getting to this part of the brain
It
because
never gets right. It never gets to this
right.
part. So this
So
part
I
says,
can't
oh
even
my God.
process the trauma.
Nope,
I can't tell myself that it's
nope,
okay.
nope, not at all. Because the part
Gotcha.
of the brain where the memory's at is connected to the part of the brain where the creativity is at. And this part says, oh my God, it's a bee. I'm going to die. And this part says, run. And it doesn't realize that the bee's not even near you. You hear it, it's on the flower. It
And
doesn't give
so
you. Yep.
and I'm laughing because I think about when you watch these silly TikTok videos where people are doing the pranks and the people start running, and it's not until they stop and then
Mm,
they process and then they start to laugh because it took them to do all of the fight or flight stuff to get to the place where then they're laughing. They're like, oh, how come I didn't see that? Right. And then it's funny because then
yes,
it gets to that part of their brain where they can process it and now they can laugh about it.
yes, yes. And there's that awareness, right? It's the
Right.
afterwards, like, oh my goodness.
Right.
But when they're in it,
Right.
like I've had clients who don't get their hair washed because
Right.
the brainstem is like any other organism. It's built on survival. So when that signal goes down, it doesn't get to the part that thinks about what you're thinking. It's like, oh my goodness. So when this is on fire, this is off. You can't access
Mhm.
this. You can't access your
Gotcha.
personality, which is why people
Wow.
say, or
Okay.
heroic people, this is
Uh-huh.
really a good person, but they hit somebody with a car like Halle Berry and they went home because they're
Uh-huh.
in an emotional shock and who they are is not
Mhm.
showing up. It's turned off.
Gotcha.
They're
Gotcha.
not being themselves because they're
Gotcha.
disconnected.
Gotcha.
Okay.
And so interestingly enough, right? So when you see clients, like, so when clients come in and you've been working with them for maybe a year or so, and then at some point you hit something and the tears start to flood and things start to come, and all of a sudden they have a
Yeah.
memory of something that happened to them that has been so suppressed and so hidden because they couldn't even begin to process it in the front part of their brain.
It wasn't safe to process it because
It
to
wasn't
process it
safe.
means I feel it and I got to name it, like
Mhm.
penis, and I got to think about, oh, that belongs to a family member.
Uh-huh.
I've got
And
to
so
think
the naming it could happen when you see something that says, "Oh, that's what that is."
that's
But
what that
then you
is,
can
right?
process it. "Oh, that happened to me."
Yeah,
Huh, wow.
absolutely. But
And we
until
think about children and how long it takes them to get a vocabulary so they can hold on to something that happened to
yeah,
them when they're children for a long time because they don't even have the language.
absolutely. So part of therapy is getting you to a safe place where you can be feeling comfortable with being uncomfortable, right?
Mhm.
And the only way we can do that if there's a connection with the clinician and the connection with the self. When the self
Mhm.
realizes, unlike as a child, I can sit
Mhm.
with this. I can
Right.
visit this
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
whatever I'm afraid of is in the memory. Because trauma is about what's in the memory feels real. Right? What's in the past feels present. And if I sit with it and realize that even my heart's beating, I can sit with this. I can sit with part of it. And that
Uh-huh.
really is the polyvagal. I can sit with part of it. And now that I can sit with part of it, I can process it and I can release it. Because when you bury a thought or a memory, you bury the
Uh-huh.
emotions with it. It's like every memory is like a movie, right? Every movie
Mhm.
has a soundtrack,
Mhm.
right? And
Yes.
when I
Yes.
turn off the if I turn off the
Yeah. Yeah.
music, I don't really enjoy the movie. They go hand in hand. So when I
Right,
hear
right.
Joyce's
Or
music,
sometimes you hear the music and the movie comes back, the
they,
visual comes back
they get
because you heard the
scared.
music,
They
right?
get
It
scared.
all
So
comes
people will say,
together.
right.
Yeah.
So people say, I'm depressed. I don't want to think about stuff. I don't want to think. I don't want to think. So I'm going to get high. Or
Right.
I don't know. I was thinking about something and I didn't want to stay there too long because I didn't want to take me to. But you never stay there, so it never gets processed. And then all the emotions are still stuck in it, and you've never given it air.
Right.
You've never
Right.
released it. And the polyvagal experience is how to get the body attuned so it can experience something that broke your heart or experience something that made you feel rage or vulnerable and be able to sit with that so that it can be released. So there are different ways of getting you there, but it all is polyvagal. So some people will
Gotcha.
spend thousands of dollars learning how to manage the polyvagal, and they'll call it something else, but it all is polyvagal.
Right.
It really
So
is.
EMDR, brain spotting,
Yep,
all of these things really are still tied to this. So as a therapist,
everything is.
right, we go in and we do EMDR, but what I was thinking about, the eye movement really is what it's doing is it's giving permission for that memory to come in,
Yes.
um, and then that
Mhm.
memory to come up. And so it's funny,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I get how so
Yeah.
it's just crazy because I'm thinking how it all ties together.
Yes.
But if you really have this polyvagal theory like down, it really is going to enhance any EMDR
Oh,
you have,
everything
any
makes
brain
sense.
spotting you have. It's just going to enhance it
Right.
greatly.
It helps make it makes everything make sense. So if you do brain spotting, you're finding the spot of activation. You're using the eyes because the eyes are the only organ that goes directly to the brain. So I'm activating that by finding that pain and I'm
Gotcha.
making you sit with it. And when you sit with it, that movie comes up. The movie you didn't want to see, the movie you only saw bits
Now
and
you're
pieces of.
breathing through it. Yeah.
Right. And
You're
I'm having you
calming
sit
yourself.
with it. Yeah. In a way
Yeah.
that
And the
and
same thing with EMDR,
same
right?
thing with
I'm
eating.
having
I'm
you
having
sit.
you move your eyes, but what I'm
Uh-huh.
really doing is I'm activating that limbic system in the hippocampus. Hippocampus is the memory system. And I'm having
Uh-huh.
you look at the movie in slow motion. So imagine seeing like Friday the 13th in slow motion, where you're seeing
Uh-huh.
1 second at a time. You're not seeing it in real motion, you're slowing it down. And for a lot of
Mhm.
us, we do that. I'm a scaredy cat. So if I see a movie that's not a movie theater, I'm like, stop it. Okay, go ahead, go
Uh-huh.
ahead. Right.
Right,
I
right,
watch
right,
it
right,
and I
right.
go, okay, well, what's going to happen next? They're going to die. They're going to die. Okay, now I can see it, right? I know what's
Okay.
going to happen. And you know what's going to happen in the movie, but
Gotcha.
it is different when you
Gotcha.
take your time and you sit with it. And it's like, that was all there. You didn't get promotion to feel everything because it got shut off. It got shut down in the body or it got pushed away to the
Gotcha.
side into the memory. And what
Gotcha.
polyvagal does, it allows you to connect to the self and be aware of the thoughts and aware how the body experiences at the same time so that all
Gotcha.
parts of you are having the ability to release it and you don't have to
Gotcha.
hold it or
Gotcha.
carry it anymore,
Gotcha.
which is why it's so important.
Gotcha. Okay. So I think we got so you were checking in with the client frequently. I
Mm-hmm.
think yes, right?
Yeah.
Checking
Uh-huh.
on what's going on. Go
Yeah.
ahead and answer that question for her. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Um,
you're checking with
yes.
the client because you want there to be a relationship with the client, a relationship with you, and a relationship to the self. Because the polyvagal is really
Gotcha.
based on when I said about the egg and the sperm. It's based on that
Mhm.
connection because co-regulation is how we create safety. So
Okay.
we look for
Gotcha.
we look for safety in different ways. We look at it from how we're looking at people, our eyes. There's
Mhm.
the membrane ear picks up sounds, right? So for
Mhm.
survival, cavemen had to figure out the sound of a elephant, a giraffe, and a tiger.
Mhm.
It listened for safety, and we look for cues and how the
Mhm.
face looks. For how things
Mhm.
smell. We look for
Mhm.
cues for safety, and when we can't figure it out, the first thing we do is we pull away and
Mhm.
polyvagal has you look at those cues and acknowledge that those are cues, but allow you to be
Mhm.
curious and recognize that you're in a safe space within self, that it's okay to be
Gotcha.
open. Yeah.
Okay. So then this leads me to okay. So this leads me to where I was going. So we
Yes.
kind of understand the theory. There's a nerve that runs down to your stomach. We
All
understand
the way down
that
to
when
your
it's
feet.
activated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
go
Oh, I'm sorry.
over the
All the way
body.
down to your feet, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that makes sense, right? So when clients come in and they're tapping their feet and they're trying to calm
Yeah.
themselves, right? So like it makes sense. People are like, oh, I got butterflies in my stomach. All of this makes so much sense. It's connecting like to all the stuff, right? That
Yeah.
you hear.
Mm-hmm.
But what I want to talk about, and our guest, I hope I'm saying this right, Aneem. I'm not sure. I apologize if I'm saying that wrong. But I think where she was going, and I'd like to go is, so she said, so you check in with the client throughout sessions, and so I think yes, we are checking. Thank you. And so I think that yes, we are checking in with the client, but one of the questions that I've always asked is like, so what is polyvagal? Because in my mind, it's like, well, it's not like EMDR, right? So it's not like this whole session that you
Yeah.
do. It's not like brain spotting the whole thing, but it's really techniques that you use. Like if you're in session and somebody's activated, and then
Yeah.
you stop and you use these techniques to help them ground themselves. Is that it?
Absolutely. Polyvagal is a nerve. And then Dr. Porg has created a theory about the nerve. because it was a missing link. Because even though danger, when danger came, there was a fight flight response. There was another response that happened, which is the shutdown response, and he had to figure out why people, even reptilians, flipped over. Why even after the danger was over, they're still in that place. Why people historically at times don't seem to know when it's safe to speak, and why they stay dysregulated for longer, for years after the traumas happen. And polyvagal explains that. And what we can do it now that we know what the nerve does, we now realize that we can get people to a place where they can be less activated, more regulated, and more connected. Because there are a lot of
Mhm.
people, especially during COVID, but when trauma happened, when COVID happened, they became dysregulated and they became disconnected. So then the incidence of violence, domestic violence increased, incidence of relapse increased, of suicide attempts increased. All those things happen because we were disconnected. And polyvagal, we check in with them because we're teaching them how to check in with themselves as well. Because oftentimes when people are disconnected, they're not checked in. They're more checked in with their thought, or they're checked in with their body, right? But they're not checked in with both. And it really is a system of bringing both parts together so that the person can be present and can process all the way through and develop some coping mechanisms, right?
Mhm.
So they can be
Right.
present.
Gotcha. Okay. I absolutely love this. And so, um, part of what we're going to be doing in the training, I asked for this, is one, the first half is really learning and understanding what polyvagal is, where it is in our body, just
Yeah, yeah.
all the technical stuff, right? And then on the second day, is learning the techniques. So are there actual techniques? Well, there
Oh,
are
yeah.
actual techniques that
There
we
are actual
do, that we
techniques and
learn.
exercises. Yeah,
Okay.
there are actual techniques and exercises that we do. And this is what I love is that if you're a purist, you know that no modality is extremely pure. So I had the person tell me hypnosis said, oh, EMDR came out of body hypnosis, and brain spanning comes out of EMDR and and SE comes out of it. They're all intertwined because they all bring you to the same goal and they all play upon the same nerve. So when you come to the training, you're going to learn a little bit of a couple of modality techniques from other modalities, and you're going to learn some just polyvagal exercises. We're going to intersperse them because the goal is of healing and regulation. It doesn't matter how you get there, as long as you get there in a safe way for the client and that protects the integrity of the session. Because when
Yeah.
the client leaves the room, they're supposed to leave with some tools that they can use.
Right, absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think that has always been my style. I don't want clients to come to therapy and feel dependent upon me. I
Yeah.
want them to be able to come to session. And so the reason why I was saying like doing this live is even for people who are just lay people who are going to go to therapy or have anxiety or have depression, I want them to understand that, to ask for this so that they get the tools that they need to self-regulate, to calm themselves. Because as a therapist, I can't, can't be there all the time. I know you take me somewhere on your shoulder and you take me with you. Like, I
Yeah.
heard you in my ear, Miss Denise. I was thinking about what you would tell me, Miss Denise. And then I always kind of laugh, right? But yes,
Yeah.
and I want you to have these things. I want you to have these
Yes.
techniques. I want you to be able to take them with you because, like
Yes.
I said, anxiety is, I see it and I have clients and it's such a big thing in their body. So I'm so, and I talk about anxiety, but the same thing with trauma, the same thing with
Yeah.
depression, right? And so much of the anxiety and the depression really is stemming from the trauma, right?
Yeah.
That we're carrying around.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't even know that it's trauma. So we're just like, I got depression, I got anxiety. Because you have some trauma that's back there.
Yeah.
So the goal here is to learn these techniques.
Yeah.
And in all fairness, because I like to be transparent, you can go out online and see some of these techniques. Because I kept thinking, well, before I could find you, I was like, what is polyvagal? Like, tell me. And
Right.
so I went and I found a few exercises, and I was
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, I got
Mhm.
it. I see how it works. And then I met you, and you kind of explained how it ties into the
Yeah.
and how it
Yeah.
ties to the brain's body. So
Yeah.
I was excited.
And one of the things I want to say, there's a pedagogy with trauma trainings, right? It's like anything in life. If I sell you some sneakers that are $1,000, you're going to think they're better than the sneakers that are $50, right? If I give you the training that takes you 3 years to finish, you're going to think it's better than the 2-day training.
Yeah.
But what if it's not? And what if that's it's a marketing tool? And what if sometimes that's how we get brainwashed? Because here's the thing: does it bring us to the same place? It does. Does it
Mm,
make sense? And does it do the healing? Yes. We just call them different things like Nikes and Pumas, but they really are the same thing. They're a sneaker. But this is a modality that gets right to the the crux of what's going on. And you're right, there aren't that many clinicians of color who talk about polyvagal and do polyvagal exercises and trainings. So I am honored, and I hope that
Very
there'll be
nice.
more of us. I hope there'll be more of us. So, um, oh yeah, and I do both. I love
We
both,
got
and
she's
that's
doing EMDR, brain spotting, right?
yeah,
And so
no, I do everything.
right there with you. I'm finishing IFS right now. I've already got EMDR. And I think that's the thing is, and I think
Yeah.
that's really my things. We keep doing these things. And, you had mentioned somatic healing. And I wanted you to just take a few minutes, for those out there that are watching that again, or lay people that are not therapists or maybe therapists,
Yeah.
of how the somatic and what somatic healing is, because it's starting to
Oh, yes. Oh, I love it. It's
how the
great
body.
about Peter Levine. And what it does, it believes that the experiences are within the body, and that if you sit, the body will heal itself. The body will teach you how to heal and how to regulate on its own. So with somatic hearing, you allow the person to be in tune with what the emotion is, what the pain is, and you ask them to sit with that attunement and to see what's connected, what thoughts or feelings that come up naturally. And because sometimes we think about it and go, don't think, just feel it. And just notice where that feeling's at. It's in your chest and see what's connected to that. And that's what somatic to me, it's like a beautiful pacing, like a beautiful dance, where you're really getting connected somatically. Somatic means the body, to the body on what's connected to the body historically. And sitting with it so it unfolds on its own. So it
Yeah.
really is
Yeah.
a dance. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a book, even for a layperson, it's a good read, and that's The Body Keeps the Score. And
Yes.
really, that's what we were talking about, is that you can come in and do talk therapy. And there's two things that I want to just talk about really quick. You can come in and do therapy, right? And we can do this talk thing, but your body's still holding all the stuff.
All of it.
And that's what I quickly began to understand what's happening, is that the body's holding all of the stuff.
Enormous.
So and it's true, right? If you see somebody who was in a car accident and they start telling the story of the car accident, you see their hands start to move and things start to happen, and their body's just really acting out exactly what they saw. I did an EMDR session with someone who was recently woke up to a robber in their house, and why
Mhm.
they were doing, I was doing the short protocol of EMDR, and why they were giving me the short protocol, they were moving their hands like the very first round. And so they were so activated that they were telling the story, but they were using their hands. And I knew that this is probably what was going on in that very moment, right?
Yeah.
And you could see it in their body. And then so as we did the EMDR and it came down, the hands came down, they could tap, they could do the thing. So
Yeah.
that's how we know it rests in the body. The
Oh,
other thing that you said that just dawned on me is we use this word therapeutic alliance. And so I tell people when they first come to me about the therapeutic alliance, and you're not going to heal if you don't find the right therapist to make you feel safe. But that's like on the for real side. Like, because if you like physically don't
yeah.
connect and your
Yeah.
system doesn't, so it's more than just saying you got to connect with the client.
Yes.
This is the word energy. There
Mhm.
really is a true attunement
There
that you're
is.
looking
Yeah.
for. So
Because
yes, when a client shows up, they got to really attune to you.
yes, because that attunement goes back to the egg and the sperm, right? There's connection, there's a regulation. And when there's disruption in childhood, or there's a death, or there's abuse, or someone's in the military, or there's addiction, that the person comes dysregulated and may stay disattuned, dysregulated, detached. So the clinician comes to reparent. It comes to bring back that attunement. Like, did you see the movie Avatar, where they bring that tail and they go into the thing of life? That's the attunement. It brings you back to that connection because
Yeah,
that's the circle
yeah,
of life. It
right.
really
Yeah,
is, right?
yeah,
And that's what the
yeah.
polyvagal nerve is about. It's about the social connection and the attunement that happens.
I love it. I love it.
Yes,
So I'm super excited.
me too.
Um, I'm so super excited. Oh, and I think the last thing that I wanted to just talk about is the polyvagal training that we're holding. It was really important to me to find a clinician of color. But I want to just talk a little bit, just for a second, about why that's important. Is because, again, we're talking about going into spaces, even as clinicians with educations and master's degrees and PhDs, but yet we still have to show up with our whole body, our inner child, our wounded child, our the part of us that showed up in spaces where we weren't welcomed. And that still exists today for me as a clinician, when I step into a room full of clinicians who may not look like me, and we're
Mhm.
having conversations and we're talking, and we happen to be talking about clients who don't really match my demographics. And we're
Mm.
talking about what that looks like. We're seeking help, and it looks different sometimes. There's some commonalities. But when I talk about creating training and creating spaces for clinicians of color to feel safe so that they can finally let down their guard,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah,
they can attune to you,
yeah,
right? The the facilitator, so that we can really take it in as opposed to sitting in the training and wondering, am I okay? Is this imposter? Do I
yeah,
sound
yeah,
stupid? Do I fit in? Like you're going through all of that stuff. And so you're missing all the stuff you're teaching because you're worried about the
yeah.
surroundings you're in.
Yeah. And here's the thing that happens many times unconsciously. We don't realize what we don't get until it shows up. Because I know that I went to a training, brain spotting, with John Edwards, and he had
Mhm.
created an infinity space. And I'm like a people person. I want people to get along a little bit. And I was like, why does it be an infinity space? Like, I get along with everybody, da da da. And the experience, and for a lot of people, if you've never had an affinity space, you think that it doesn't matter and that people are people and we all get along and you don't understand the difference. And maybe you're one of those people like me. Like, I don't care what space I'm in, I got something to say. I'm going to say what I need to say. But
Me too.
but when you're in an affinity space, and I remember getting to that space and hearing clinicians start off talking about race and racism and their experience and starting to cry. And then you realize, whoa, I've never been in a space like this. So the first thing we do is that we're doing a cleansing. And we're talking about when you come on a screen and you see everyone looks like you, it does something to you. It's like, and if you've never had that experience, you may not know why that's important. But when you get in that experience, it's like,
You'll know.
because I remember seeing 100 clinicians and got my
Wow.
husband like, look at this. And he was like, whoa, what's going on? He was like, because I had never seen 100 clinicians who look like me, who
Yeah.
sound like me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it,
Yeah.
and it does something. It's that whole connection, right? It's an ancestral connection. It goes back to that polyvagal nerve because my
Oh,
brain says, this is safe.
hmm.
And my
Yeah.
brain says, I know what that's like to be
Yeah.
othered, to be the
Yeah.
only, to have to
Yeah.
not want to say the wrong thing, to offend people,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And my
Yeah.
brain, and that's
Yes.
huge. And
Oh
that
my God.
really is a liberating moment. So for
Right.
those of you who have never
Yes.
been in an infinity space, it
Right.
is a gift that you need to give yourself.
Yeah.
It's-
And so, and what I would say is, yes, it is. I did my EMDR in somewhat of an infinity space and where there were quite a few clinicians of color, but I'm doing IFS in an affinity space. And
mm,
it feels so much different.
mhm.
But what I want to say to other clinicians that might be watching and like, well, why do you have to have this infinity space? You can't always have an infinity space, but what you can do when
Yes.
it's not an infinity space and it's mixed is that you can start off by acknowledging
Yeah.
everyone in the room and the differences in the room instead
Yeah.
of pretending like there are no differences in the room,
Yeah.
right? Because the minute that someone pretends like there's no difference in the room, my alarm goes off and I am reminded in that very moment that you didn't see me and that I am different, right?
Absolutely.
Um, and it's not just me as my color, but me as a woman. It's the same for someone who may be in a wheelchair or someone who is sight impaired, speaking impaired, hearing impaired, someone from the LGBT community. Pretend like those things that don't exist. It's not helpful to pretend like they don't exist. We
Absolutely.
want you to know that they exist.
Absolutely.
Right.
And it's similar to what Resma says, the author of My Grandmother's Hands, who says that
Mhm.
healing has to happen to the people who need to heal, and healing has to happen to the people who've done the harm. And those healing experiences happen
Yeah,
separate, right?
right.
Because
Yes,
there's
right.
something that they've experienced historically that's caused them to do
Hmm.
harm. And even though they have great
Yes,
intentions towards, they've got to look at that historical root,
yes,
right? Because
yes,
there's a
yes,
whole legacy historically with
yes,
them. And then
yes,
there's a legacy with us of being the
yeah,
harm and sometimes perpetuating harm within our own culture. And really
yeah,
being able to sit with that.
yeah, yeah.
It's healing
So
for
thank you so much, so
everyone.
much. Uh, are we going to do the replay for this?
Yes, the replay will be on LinkedIn, but it'll also be on my YouTube channel, Dope Black Therapist. Please like, subscribe, and share. And I hope that you can make it to this. Is going to be an amazing event. I'm excited about it. And it's my work passion to just to teach people, because I know that once you do all the modalities, or you do most of the modalities, you look back and go, wow, if I could have done it differently, I would have done this. If I had someone who could have said, hey, let me show you something, use this, you'll get there the same direction. Right. But sometimes
Yeah,
we do
yeah,
the
absolutely.
oppressive thing, the pedagogy thing, and we
Yes,
go, I need to have those Jordans. No, you need to have what works.
yes. Yeah. And so what I will do is I will also get the link, and I will put the link on all of my sites so that you all can go in and replay this. And so just for identification's sake, I am Denise Williams, licensed marriage and family therapist. I have a private practice in the Southern California area called WellPlay Counseling and Wellbeing Center. We're always doing different things besides just therapy, because I believe we heal in community. So we try to create community events so that people, hey, Ty. So we try to come in and we try to create spaces for people to just connect and heal, again, because we heal in community. And now I have a better understanding of how we also heal in community. And we're going to be holding this training February 9th and 10th. There's a correction. There will be CEUs, but the CEUs are for 5.5 hours, so it's 11
Yeah.
CEUs for both days.
Yes.
And we're going to have a good time. I had the privilege and pleasure of having dinner with Miss Candice so that we could kind of talk and connect, and it was really great and amazing. Um, and so I'm just excited. I'm excited to be able to create spaces for people to heal, to learn. I put on my vision board a couple of years ago, I create radical spaces for healing. And
Oh, I
that's what
love that. We are sisters of the heart,
yes,
and
we are.
we are so similar. We are twins, she's
Yeah.
created well space. I have something called Color Trauma and Healing, where, I honor BIPOC clinicians who specialize in trauma, and we have a provider directory, because sometimes you can't find us. You can't
Yes.
find people who not just do trauma, but who look like us. And if I look at other provider directories, it takes me a minute to find us. And I wanted to have a
Yes.
place where you can find not just clinicians, but find yogi practitioners, doulas. I wanted all healers to be in one place. And I also am in private practice. If anyone's in DC and Maryland looking for a clinician, I'm taking new clients. My website
Yes.
is CandiceRDickens.com. But I am so excited, my sis. This is going to be an amazing event. And I want to say
Yes.
thank you, everyone,
It's
for being
amazing.
part of this tonight. This has been awesome. So I'm all pumped up. I can't wait.
Me too. Bye, guys. Thank you for joining us. Have an amazing day.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.